Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that I found at random at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. It is a book about injustice and accusations of terrorism in India. I am referring to A Burning by Megha Majumdar, which was published in 2020. For those who don't know, Megha Majumdar is an Indian author who moved to America. She is a pretty new author. This is her first book that is published, and what a doozy it is for being her first book. I've read quite a few first books on this channel, some of them pretty high quality, some of them in the middle, and some of them not particularly good. But, thankfully I can say that this is a high quality book. She's also an editor, and there's not really much else about her beyond the fact that she does some teaching here and there. She's quite well-rounded in that literature regards, and that she's teaching and also writing it. I do hope that she ends up writing more, but this is the only thing that she's written so far. I will say when I do a review of this book, I'm not going to spoil it in the summary section, but I will talk about some spoilers in the analysis section as it's difficult to talk about otherwise. So I strongly recommend that you go out, read this book, and then come back to my review, because I am going to recommend it in the end. I just want to make sure no one gets it spoiled before they've had a chance to enjoy it. So anyways, without further ado, let's talk about A Burning. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So A Burning focuses on three revolving characters. There's Jivan, who is the primary protagonist of this story. She is a young Muslim woman from a poor background. Her family was refugees from Bangladesh when she was young, and so she's been struggling to make ends meet. Her family has been struggling to make ends meet ever since. But as the story starts, she has finally reached a point where she's starting to make money, and she might finally be able to get out of the slums. Of course, the rest of the story takes place from there. The story also focuses on a hijra named Lovely. I believe, based on what I've read, that a hijra, based on what I've looked up online, a hijra is a transgender individual, or someone who is trying to make that transition. Maybe someone who dresses in drag. The word can mean a bunch of different things. But Lovely aspires to be an actor or an actress. She's not having that much success, and she's only being offered stereotypical parts for what a hijra is. And she's also being taught English by Jivan, so she can make an effort to, succeed in a world that is increasingly reliant on English, especially in India. And then the story also focuses on a character named P.T. Sir. P.T. Sir is a PE teacher at an Indian school that doesn't seem to be doing too well. Jivan went to this school, and P.T. Sir had a positive relationship with her, although he was very disappointed when she stopped coming to the school because her family didn't have enough money to pay for it anymore. And as the story goes on, he becomes more involved in a right-wing political party that seeks to make a name off of what is happening to Jivan in the story. And at the start of the story, Jivan is accused of terrorism. She criticizes the government on Facebook for their response to a terrorist attack. The police come for her the next day, and they beat a confession out of her. And Jivan admits to doing a crime that she may not have committed, aiding and abetting the terrorists who have since seemed to have left India altogether. The person who can provide an alibi for her is Lovely, but Lovely is afraid of the police because of how they've taken advantage of her and hurt her in the past. But over time, she eventually decides to provide that alibi for Jivan and speak out on her behalf. Meanwhile, P.T. Sir is engaging in a lot of political opportunism, trying to raise his station in life by hanging out with the right-wing political party. And they're also paying him to basically go to court and testify against people who may have done crimes. These are people who are known in the community to be, kind of less than reliable characters, but they haven't been accused of any crime in particular. The right-wing party seems to be lying about them in order to make communities safer, and P.T. Sir is helping with that, and he's also helping the party gain relevance by having them speak out about Jivan, given that P.T. Sir knows her. Jivan is finally able to talk to a journalist at this prison she's in, and she speaks to a man named Pernendu, where she tells her history, how her family threw poop and piss bombs at the police when the police tried to run them out of the refugee camp that they were in, how they moved to India and things didn't really get better for them, partially because they were poor, but also because they were Muslim. A lot of people took advantage of them. They grew up in the slums. The government didn't seem to care about what happened to them, and the hospital, where Jivan's dad went to, ended up causing further problems for him, and so he's developed back issues throughout his life as a result. And she tells all this to Pernendu in the hopes that he'll share her story and help tell what is happening to her. She ends up revealing that during the events of the train attack, of the terrorist attack on the train, she was there smoking a cigarette and kind of hiding out from her parents, who didn't know that she had started cutting school. She says that she saw the terrorists throw bombs in the train and that the people on the train were reaching out to her, but she ran away, not really knowing what to do. And she tells Pernendu that the only thing she's really guilty of is being a coward. Pernendu tells Jivan that his editor will need to spice things up a little bit, and when she reads the news article later, it basically paints her as a terrorist, over sensationalizing her history and saying that she has a history of anti-government sentiment, which she does, but that's only because the government has mistreated her. And so there's a great sense of betrayal on Jivan's part, where she doesn't know how she's going to get people to see the accurate side of what happened in this situation when they so readily want to accuse her of this crime. Eventually, the court trial happens. P.T. Sir ends up testifying against Jivan, saying that after she disappeared from school, it's likely that she started hanging out with terrorists, even though he doesn't really know if she was or not, again showing his opportunism. Lovely also testifies on her behalf, shaming the spectators in the courtroom by noting that they don't really know anything about Jivan, and they're just making up a lot of BS in order to gain something out of life. But it seems that Lovely is the only one speaking out for Jivan. And unfortunately, the judge decides that the evidence in this case merits a sentence of guilty, and he decides to sentence her to death. At this point, this is the last 100 pages of the story, and I don't want to go into spoilers in this section, so I'll urge you to go read it if you're going to go read it. Otherwise, there's going to be a little bit of spoilers in the analysis section from there. In terms of analysis, this is possibly one of the saddest books that I have read. I felt a great sense of betrayal from Majumdar's writing. I felt like a great sense of hurt, which is exactly what she wants you to feel. I felt Jivan's journey as she tried to get out of prison and ultimately wasn't able to succeed. Spoiler alert, she's sentenced to death, and she in fact is hanged, executed in that way. And P.T. Sir and Lovely, they're led to live the rest of their lives knowing how they impacted Jivan and maybe took advantage of the moment, which is very unfortunate. One of the ideas that Majumdar is working with here is injustice, especially injustice for people on the fringes of society. The first way you see this is with Jivan. Like, Jivan is a victim of a miscarriage of justice. She is sentenced to death for a crime that she, in all likelihood, didn't commit. We never find out for certain if she did it, because we really only hear from her. And, even the guilty will say that they're innocent from time to time. But I don't believe that she actually committed the crime. She's sentenced to death, and she is put to death for this crime that she apparently committed. And every step of the way, the system seems to work against Jivan, possibly because she's a woman, but also because she's a Muslim living in India. The culture of India is such that there is conflict between the Hindus and the Muslims for a wide variety of reasons, which has existed for quite some time, and it would require a whole other video to go into, the history of that. So I'm just going to say it's a very complicated situation, and so it doesn't help Jivan in the story to be a Muslim, to come from Bangladesh, in particular, when India doesn't have the most positive of histories with both groups, with Bangladeshians and with Muslims. The system seems to be against Jivan in terms of the media, how they portray Jivan, how they work to paint her as anti-government in any sense of the word, using her Facebook post against her. Although Facebook posts don't indicate guilt, anybody can do a Facebook post, and you can say anything because there's pretty much no content limits on Facebook and social media. And she doesn't really say anything. She's just saying the government could have done more to the people who were hurt in the train attacks, but the government has so often failed people, which is a normal thing for someone to think. But here, because she is Muslim, the system is working against her and punishes her for her behavior. It's punished her family for trying to find a better life in India, it punished her, like the police punished her because they wanted a confession out of her, and so they beat it out of her. The system punished her for trying to admit her guilt in some way. And ultimately, because she put her faith in the media, she was taken advantage of there as well. So things are just a boatload of injustice here for Jivan for a wide variety of reasons. But it also seems that Jivan is being used as a scapegoat in this way. That maybe she didn't actually commit the crime, but it's merely convenient that she's here because they have someone to pin it on, even if she didn't do the crime. There's a good quote that I would like to read to you. Be that as it may, the judge takes a deep breath and I feel the air in my own lungs. It is clear that the defendant has long been disloyal to the values of this nation. The defendant has spoken clearly against the government, against the police, on the internet, on Facebook.com. This lack of loyalty is not something to be taken lightly. It is its own strong piece of evidence. There is a case to be made as well for soothing the conscience of the city, of the country. The people demand justice. And that's a really interesting quote because it's showing that just because she said something bad against India, against the government, that they might be holding a grudge against her, that the system is working against her in that way. But also it says in here that there's a case to be made against soothing the conscience of the country. That maybe it doesn't matter if it's Jivan who did the crime or not. What matters is putting the country's fears to rest that the criminals are out there. Because if you punish her, the rest of the country might just get over their worries. That it doesn't matter if she did it or not. What matters is that there's symbolic justice, the theater of justice, where somebody is punished whether they did it or not, and the whole country moves on from that fact. And that is really terrifying. This entire quote is terrifying because this shows that perhaps the aim of this trial, perhaps the aim of many trials, is not to find whether or not someone is guilty, but to find them guilty because of a perceived need for someone to be found guilty. It's really a really scary kind of thought, and this kind of thing happens every day, not just in India but all around the world, to people who are seen as scapegoats, as easy targets to deliver a sense of justice. In addition to all of this, there's also Lovely, who suffers her own injustice. She's on the margins of society, and she, because she's trans, and she suffers in a wide variety of ways from her her ex-boyfriend's like family, who didn't feel that she was enough for the ex-boyfriend because she was a hijra, because she was trans, and they wanted the ex-boyfriend to be in a relationship with a woman, to the fact that the government, tries to prohibit her from testifying at all, that the government really doesn't want Jivan to be found innocent, and Lovely's testimony will, help in some aspects. There's another interesting quote that I would like to read to you. Many years ago, I would have been asking, why is this happening? But now I am knowing that there is no use asking these questions. In life, many things are happening for no reason at all. You might be begging on the train and get acid thrown on your face. You might be hiding in the women's compartment for safety and getting kicked by the ladies. And she also goes on to talk about how she, sometimes the police target her for no good reason. And there's a lot of injustice happening towards Lovely because of who she is in life. So not only is injustice happening towards Jivan, but there's injustice happening towards these other characters. Another big theme of this book is political and personal opportunism. Many characters seem to benefit from demonizing Jivan. Whether or not it's money or power or just getting up a station in life, a lot of characters seem to make something off of themselves from demonizing Jivan and painting her as this deep criminal. There's Pernendu in this story, who's the journalist who Jivan tells her story to, and I think that Pernendu has good intentions, or had good intentions, but because he works for a newspaper that sensationalizes, and because of his editor, he's not able to tell Jivan's story for what it is. And so this newspaper, as well as the many other newspapers that are and just general media outlets that are covering her story, are making a lot of money off the attention that Jivan's coverage is getting. This also happens to P.T. Sir, where he benefits from he's an opportunist here because he's benefiting from Jivan's story because he was closely associated with her in school. The leaders of the political party that he's allying himself with want him closer so that he can spread awareness of Jivan, or even just bring more attention to the political party. And ultimately, he ends up catapulting himself up to the top of echelon of the political party off Jivan's name alone, mainly done through the trial. And ultimately, what he does is he manages to convince Jivan's lawyer to give him the mercy petition that they were going to do so Jivan wouldn't be sentenced to death. And he just buries this in his new position as some secretary in this political party once they gain power. And you can see he's doing everything in his power to make sure Jivan stays where she is, because he stands to get more political power from it and more just money from it, because he makes a lot of money as he climbs the social ranks. Lovely, for her part, unfortunately, Lovely also gains from Jivan's situation because of her performance in the trial, where she speaks out about the people who are not telling Jivan's real side of the story. That gains attention, and then more people are paying attention to her acting skills. And as a result, she ends up getting some pretty lucrative acting gigs, and she manages to break into the field. And it feels unfair to say she's being opportunistic about Jivan, but if she had not gone to the trial and delivered this performance, which you could argue it was a performance about Jivan, maybe she wouldn't have gotten those acting gigs. And I think Jivan realizes that, Lovely realizes that too, because she says she's never going to forget this, that she always, when she's giving a performance, she visualizes Jivan's face in her mind, because she knows where this is all coming from, and she knows that someone had to die for her to gain something. P.T. Sir also sees the ghost of Jivan after she dies, because he knows that his position of power was gained by sentencing this woman to death, and he's probably never going to forget it. The government also stands to benefit from all this because they get to clear their conscience and they get to look like they did something about a criminal when they in fact did not actually do their due diligence in solving this crime of terrorism. What's really interesting though is that there are no real consequences in this story for any of the opportunism that takes place. This is a bit different from a typical Western style story, because in Western stories I feel like you would see consequences for this heinous behavior, but in Eastern style stories you don't really see that. And that's what happens here, where these characters, they might feel a little guilt, they might feel bad about what they've done, but ultimately they benefit and they're not really punished in any meaningful karmic sort of way. And that's really heinous. It really sucks to see P.T. Sir get away with this, that he allowed Jivan to be stuck in prison and sentenced to death when he could have said or done something, and he did nothing. And unfortunately, that's how the world is much of the time. I like how Majumdar manages to capture that real atmosphere, where sometimes bad people do bad things because it gets them power, and the people who have the most power to do the most good often do nothing because they stand to benefit nothing from it, and in fact they might even stand to lose from doing some good in the world. I also want to say that I really like how Majumdar writes the entire section about Pernendu, where he's telling Jivan's story, and then when Jivan gets a letter, she feels a great sense of betrayal, and you also feel that great sense of betrayal. I felt that great sense of betrayal because I was hoping maybe this might be the thing that gets her out of prison. Maybe it might be the thing that helps tell her side of the story. And in the end, they sensationalize her story and they make everything worse for her. It might even be the thing that establishes that she's a criminal in the government's eyes or even the court's eyes. And I want to say it feels wrong. It really hurts. It feels like a very mean way to portray how things are going. But this is what the media does. I wouldn't have expected it really to go any other way, because the media often sensationalizes it in this way, and they fail to get the whole story before they report on something. As we've seen in many instances of just sensationalized journalism. Another interesting thing is how Majumdar used the term riot economy to describe how characters are getting ripped off by other characters in the story. Particularly with Jivan's parents, how they're sold a bill of goods by brokers in this story who want to sell them a house but end up selling them a place in the slums. And it happens with a bunch of other characters as well. And one character even says, "I'm tired of this riot economy. This is my place in the riot economy. I am nothing more than a broker." And I think that's a really fascinating term for a system of a government where there's no real sense of catering to the needs of the people, or even in an economy, you're not trying to provide a product to the person. You're trying to get the most money out of them, and if you're ripped off, well, you can just sell the product for a higher price to the next person and keep cheating people out of their money and providing them with a defective product or something like that. It's a really fascinating term to describe this entire situation. I will say one issue with the story is that some elements of the story do feel rushed. In particular, the way Jivan is in prison, it just feels like Majumdar rushes through it. She just hurries through, or some of the things happen in the background, and I feel like she could have taken more of her time with certain elements of the story and let them breathe in order to establish more emotion, or to let the story play out a little bit more, give it some more space. Even some of the critics, they describe her story as frenetic or quickly paced, breakneck pace even. And they ascribe that as a good thing, but I feel that it rushes things a little bit, and you don't get enough time to be in the moment before she rushes on to the next thing, unfortunately. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Upburning by Megha Majumdar, a pretty amazing book, one that was very difficult to read, especially as it got near the end because of the themes and ideas that Majumdar was working with, but it was a very powerful story, and ultimately I am better off for having having read it. I ask that question every time I pick out a book from randomly from the library, because there's a good chance I never would have found it otherwise, because the library is a huge place, and it's likely that I won't read a majority of the books in the library. But I'm very glad I found this one, because it's a pretty strong contender for a book of the year, one of the end of the year books, and it tells a story in a way that I haven't really experienced before, and it's also a really great work of Indian literature that I did not expect to encounter at this point. I really hope that Majumdar ends up writing more, because she has a lot of great ideas, and her storytelling is interesting. I would like to see how it evolves over time. So if you read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's talk about burning. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this book or this author if they do not already know about her. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Indian travels. Farewell.